أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما رب اجعلني مقيم الصلاة ومن ذريتي ربنا وتقبل دعاء الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وأتباعه أجمعين آمين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. We have been studying lately, last week, conciseness of speech of Quran, yet being miraculous and speaking a lot. And inshallah, this week we will continue from one of the verses that is at the very end of Surah Yasin, the 36th chapter of Quran. So I directly jump into our main text, and then I'll get back to the verses. Or maybe I should first go to the verses. So the verse he is highlighting in here is, and for example, who produces for you fire from the green tree? So let's first read the verses to give a context for ourselves. This is verse number 80 that is being mentioned here. And we will pick it up from verse number 77. And in Surah Yasin, since the beginning of the chapter, the main theme was, although it is touching upon all the major themes of Quran, like oneness of the Creator, hereafter, prophethood, speech of God, like revelation. It starts with, it briefly mentions at the very beginning, it establishes oneness of the Creator. And then within the first 12 verses, establishes the background of the chapter. And then talks about the prophethood and how people are denying the prophets. And then brings up the issue about death and how the people that deny the message of the messenger is ultimately being punished with death, because death is truly becoming a journey with no return. And it's being truly the end of everything. And then from there on builds up the idea of resurrection, though, because one of the major messages or good news that the prophets bring in is an eternal life, which is the ultimate desire for human that can satiate human. So this goes on until the end of the chapter. And at the very end, now I will start with verse number 77. أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الْإِنسَانُ أَنَّا خَلَقْنَاهُ مِنْ نُطْفَةٍ فَإِذَا هُوَ خَصِيمٌ مُبِينٌ. Does the human being not consider that we created him from a seed, or nutfa, this water droplet, yet he becomes a fierce adversary, like as if like an enemy. وَضَرَبَ لَنَا مَثَلًا وَنَسِيَ خَلْقَهُ. And he produces arguments against us, and he forgets his own creation. قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم. He says, who will revive the bones, who will give life, resurrect the bones when they have decayed? قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم. Say, he who initiated them in the first instance will revive them, will resurrect them. He has knowledge of every creation. And now the verse number 80 that we will study today. الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون. He who produced fuel for you from the green trees. he who produced fire for you from the green trees, with which you kindle a fire. أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم. Is not he who created the heavens and the earth able to create the like of them? Certainly, he is the supreme all-knowing creator. إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. His command when he wills a thing is to say to it, be, and it comes to be. فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. So glory be to him in whose hand is the dominion of everything, and to him you will be returned. So this is the concluding part of Surah Yasin, chapter 36 and verses 77 to 83. And in today's discussion, inshallah, we are going to focus on verse number 80. Now I am reading from 25th word. And for example, who produces for you fire from the green tree? Here the Quran is saying in the face of rebellious men's denials, who is as though challenging the Quran by saying, who will raise to life rotten bones? Whoever created them in the first place, he will raise them to life. And that creator knows every single aspect of every single thing. Furthermore, he who provides fire for you from the green tree is able to give life to dry bones. Furthermore, he who provides fire for you from the green tree is able to give life to dry bones. Thus, this sentence looks in numerous ways to the claim that man will be raised to life and proves it in various numerous ways. How? Let's see. Firstly, with these words, the Quran starts off the chain of bounties it lays before men, moves it forward, and calls it to mind. Quran starts off the chain of bounties it lays before men, moves it forward, and calls it to mind. Having described it in detail in other verses, it cuts short the description here and refers it to the intelligence. That is, you cannot flee from the one who gives you fruit and fire from trees, sustenance and seeds from plants, cereals and grains from the earth, and makes the earth a fine cradle for you filled with all your sustenance, and the world a palace in which is found all your needs. You cannot be independent of him or disappear into non-existence and hide there. You cannot enter the grave without duties to sleep in comfort not to be awoken. You cannot enter the grave without duties to sleep in comfort not to be awoken. Just a second. Then it points out an evidence of the claim. With the words, the green tree, it implies, O you who deny resurrection, look at the trees. One who raises to life and makes green in spring numberless bone-like trees, which have been dead throughout winter, and in every tree even demonstrates 3 examples of resurrection through the leaves, blossoms, and fruit. The power of such a one cannot be challenged through denial or by considering resurrection improbable. Then it points out another evidence saying, how do you deem it unlikely that one who extracts for you out of dense, heavy, dark matter like a tree, subtle, light, luminous matter like fire, should give fire-like life and light-like consciousness to wood-like bones? Interesting, reading it again. Then it points out another evidence saying, how do you deem it unlikely that one who extracts for you out of dense, heavy, dark matter like a tree, subtle, light, luminous matter like fire, should give fire-like? So how is it unlikely that such a one should how is it unlikely that such a one should give fire-like life and light-like consciousness to wood-like bones? Why do you think it's going to be unlikely, although you see an example of it in front of your eyes? Then it states another evidence explicitly. It says, one who creates the famous tree, which, while green, produces fire for nomads in place of matches when two of its branches are rubbed together, and combines two opposites, like the green and damp, and the dry and hot, and makes them source of the fire. Everything, even the fundamental elements, looks to his command and acts through his power. It cannot be considered unlikely of the one who demonstrates that none of these is independent and acts of its own accord, that he should raise up man from the earth once again, who was made from earth and later returned to the earth. He may not be challenged with rebellion. Then, through recalling Moses' peace be upon him famous tree, it shows that this claim of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is also that of Moses, peace and blessings be upon him. Lightly alluding to the consensus of the prophets, it adds one more subtle point to the phrase. Okay, let's stop here. So it's again a nice example of reading the Quran, and the message of the Quran is also very clearly beautiful in here. Like sometimes it's being a bit more hidden, but in here the message is also very, very clear, but the author is taking it from various angles, saying that the Quran is giving us all those rich meaning through these verses. So before we start going paragraph by paragraph, is there anyone who wants to make a comment? Like anyone who get excited? As I don't see any hands yet, so let me go through the paragraphs. And for example, who produces for you fire from the green tree? So the author is, since now we are investigating the verses, he is looking into how this verse is put into the chain of arguments within these final verses, starting from verse 77. Here the Quran is saying, in the face of rebellious men's denials, who is as though challenging the Quran by saying, who will raise to life rotten bones? Like, in verse number 78. And he produced arguments against us, and he forgets his own creation while forgetting his own creation. He says, who will resurrect the bones when they have decayed? And before that verse, even the previous verse was saying that, does the human being not consider what we created him from a water droplet like a nutfa? Yet he becomes a fierce adversary. And here the author is alluding to those verses. The rebellious man says, who will raise to life rotten bones? And in response, Quran says, whoever created them in the first place, he will raise them to life. And that creator knows every single aspect of every single thing. Furthermore, he who provides fire for you from the green tree, now coming to this verse, is able to give life to dry bones. So it becomes like this sentence becomes the reasoning or the proof of the claim above. Thus, this sentence looks in numerous ways to the claim that man will be raised to life and it proves that point. Let's see how it does again. Firstly, with these words, the Quran starts off the chain of bounties it lays before men, moves it forward, and calls it to mind. Having described it in detail in other verses, it cuts short the description here and refers it to the intelligence. Okay, so the mind who challenges here is looking at the what's in front of him and saying that, well, these are decayed bones. How are they going to be resurrected? And I feel like this is our general problem in our analysis of things, as the word analysis also implies. We isolate the thing from the environment and just investigate things within the vacuum. This is what this person is doing in here. This person is isolating the decayed bones from its environment, like space, time, how they were happened to be here in the first place, just forgetting about everything, but just looking at the decayed bones themselves right now and saying that these are so far, far away from being alive. So who is going to resurrect them? This thing which is very dull, very empty, very dry. How is it going to get resurrected? So as a remedy to this problem, Quran starts off by reminding the chain of bounties. So as if it starts completing the picture, this bone didn't just happen to be there forever like that. It's part of a story. So it reminds us where it did come from and how it ended up being that dry bone, and what does it say about its maker, who made it as such. Because otherwise, if I just analyze the bone for the sake of bone itself, it doesn't tell me much. And the one who raises this question, who makes this challenge, is just analyzing the bone just for the sake of bone itself, describing the bone itself. So as a response, Quran starts off the chain of bounties it lays before man, moves it forward and calls it to mind. But since elsewhere Quran is in detail telling how many bounties are there given to human, in here it keeps it short. And in the previous verse, it said, does man not remember how he was created, or she was created in the first place by just a water droplet? And in this verse, he says, whoever created them in the first place, he will raise them to life. So don't you think that do you think that this happened to be by itself in the first place, or it was made in the first place? Don't you see that it was made within an order? Just look at your own bones right now, which are not rotten yet. So what makes them? So the one who is making those bones alive today, this should give me some message. So that completing the picture in here is what Quran is doing as far as I can see. Okay, having described it in detail in other verses, it cuts short the description here and refers it to the intelligence. That is, you cannot flee from the one who gives you fruit and fire from trees, sustenance and seeds from plants. Okay. Okay, I guess I need to read it again. You cannot flee from the one who gives you fruit and fire from trees, sustenance and seeds from plants, cereals and grains from the earth, and makes the earth a fine cradle for you filled with all your sustenance, and the world a palace in which is found all your needs. You cannot be independent of him or disappear into non-existence and hide there. You cannot enter the grave without duties to sleep in comfort and not to be awoken. Brother Wickham, please go ahead.
Selamun Aleyküm. Jazakallah khairan. One generic thing about the text. Uh, so when I read these verse as the other people also do, most of the times the only thing that comes to my mind is a special tree that exists somewhere. The the author also talks about, which exists in somewhere, and while it's green, before even it gets dry, it is used to produce fire. It's like a famous uh, miraculous tree, and because you know the, because there is miracle that I can observe, kind of miracle, of course, that it points out to the existence of a mysterious creator. That's the usual way to read such verses, right? But of course, in the hands of a careful reader of the universe, uh, of course, the careful can be replaced with stupid or careless. Uh, Nothing happened to be a miracle. Because yes, it might be green, it might be fresh, but you can easily explain how fire, comes out of it through referring to some chemical and physical interactions. So relying on uh, the so-called miraculousness of the event that I experienced and defining miracle in a certain way, this ayah has, let's say, the weight of this ayah is not that much. The author does not deny this meaning. That's very beautiful. Author says, yeah, this such a tree exists as well. And if you look closely, it is a miracle, definitely. Don't be fooled by these stupid people who claim that there is no miracle in life. Just like everything else, this is also a miracle. And you can observe the oneness of Creator there. But even more exciting and more interesting, maybe, is that when Aya talks about green trees, author takes it as it's talking about every green tree that I experience. Because he says, at least this is what I understand from the text, the other parts of the text, there is always a transition between dry bones or dry branches in this case, and green leaves or green and fresh, lively branches. As Yusuf said, when I look at dry wood, dry branches or trees, they do not happen to be dry just out of nothing, as I experienced at least. But there's always a journey behind it. This dry branch was green before. At a certain time, it was green, fresh, but then it becomes dry, and then it becomes something else. There's always these transitions that I experience. And through these transitions, I experience very interesting different things, sometimes opposite to each other, from liveliness to uh, death, from freshness to dryness. And author says, whoever controls these transitions, who can control another transition. And he talks about, you know, the how fire coming out of dry wood. Again, something that I experience in my life all the time. You can even take it as like you don't even have to take it as it is in its explicit meaning or literal meaning. You can even take it as a metaphor and apply it to your gas stove. That fire comes out of some metal, or you know, between metal, or out of a gas, or out of electricity. All these different transitions, all the different conversions. And the ayah talks about fire and trees, and author talks about bounties, that it's something given to us. We need fire. We need fire for many things in our life, and it is given to us as a bounty. And it's given to us from somewhere not expected. Whether you take it as fire coming from green tree or dry tree, it doesn't matter. Even from dry branches, the fire is unexpected. And it is given to us as a bounty. So the way author reads Quran, the way author interprets these verses, is really lively, really exciting. He says, look at your life. See all these bounties that are given to you. See how they are given to you. See out of what, out of where they are given to you. And listen to them. What do they tell you? Where do they take you? The ayahs, the series of ayahs that Yusuf read, they end by saying, and to whom we all return, or you will all return. When you listen to these ayahs in your life, the ayahs of creation, ayahs that are carried through bounties that you receive, where do they take you? Quran says they will take you to your creator. Wherever you are right now in your life, whether you are, you know, in question, whether you are questioning, whether you are agnostic, whether you are, you know, the atheist, whether you are X, Y, Z, doesn't matter. You will return to him. If you listen to the ayah of the creation, if you look at them as a human, as we will discuss tomorrow, inshallah, in our retreat, what it means to look at things as a human. When you look at them as a human, when you listen to them, they will take you to the creator. You will be returned to your creator. Jazakallah khairan.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Birkan. So when rereading it, something also attracted my attention. In here, the author is reading into the challenge, the challenger's position. So as if the one who asks the question, who will raise the bones to life, the rotten bones? He is saying you cannot be independent of him or disappear into non-existence and hide there. So as if you're trying to escape from the creator. You cannot do that. And in in the next sentence, he is also saying, you cannot enter the grave without duties to sleep in comfort, not to be awoken. So this was interesting. Like what because there might be asking the question in the form of a question, really, who is going to really resurrect the bones? I am curious. This is why I'm asking. This might be one tone of asking the question. But also then there's this other tone of asking the question just for the arrogance or just for the sake of being challenging and whatnot. But as the previous verse was saying, does the human not consider what we created him from? Yet he becomes a fierce adversary. Like this tone of adversary, I am against someone. So you wouldn't be against someone if you don't think that one is out there. So you are challenging that one because, like for instance, let's assume in our childhood there were those creatures that were used to put children into sleep. Like they were saying that if you don't sleep, such and such, like dam kazan in Turkish, will come and eat you or something like that. So as a child, maybe I would challenge that thing because I would believe that such a thing exists that my mom is threatening me with. But now I wouldn't challenge such a thing because it's non-existent for me. I just laugh at it. But when it comes to our life, even if you are denying the creator, why would you become an adversary to the creator? It's also an interesting mindset. Someone denying God, becoming enemy of God at the same time. Like if God doesn't exist, you are enemy of whom? But this being the case, yet this animosity towards it is rooted because I don't want responsibility. I don't want to be in charge of anything. I want to hide. And this is what the author was highlighting in here. You cannot be independent of him or disappear into non-existence and hide there. You cannot enter the grave without duties to sleep in comfort, not to be awoken. And to make this point, he highlights that as the verse was reminding us of humans' creation, because I wanted to focus on the bone, the dry bone itself, and not look at the rest and say that, well, come on, you're just exaggerating. Because by focusing on a patch of existence and isolating it from the rest, I can really reduce the meaning, reduce the load. I can simply say, I mean, this small thing doesn't really prove anything. But as the verse highlights that it is part of a huge picture, and once you take everything into account, then I also am part of that picture. So then I cannot really escape anywhere. He says, the one who takes care of the whole picture as it is, actually the one who creates the whole picture, the one who gives life to everything, who gives food and sustenance to you from trees, from plants, from earth and water and everything. There is a point that he is after. So you cannot really escape in the sense that there is a reason he is doing all of these, so you are going to be held accountable. He is going to ask for it. So this part was interesting in this sense. And yeah, he even made and makes the earth a fine cradle. Your brother will come, please go ahead.
Jazakallah khairan for highlighting this. This is really interesting. That the way he talks that you cannot be independent of him, which means like you cannot disappear into non-existence. Like you cannot decide whether you exist or not. It's not your choice. Which means also, you know, you cannot hide from the order that you are created in, which also means that you cannot enter the grave without duties. So you're not going to sleep in comfort, not to be awoken. That's really interesting. Like the guy who's challenging, saying that, you know, who would create or recreate or resurrect these dry bones? Like it's going to non-existence, denying the existence beyond grave, at least apparently. Our author says, you know what? You think in reality, deep inside, that the grave will be your final resting place. It will be a comfortable sleep for you. That's how you want to imagine. And Quran says, authors, according to author, that this is not the case. That there has been a purpose in your life from the beginning. You lived with a purpose, whether you fulfilled it or not. And this purpose will follow you. There's a purpose in your death as well. So it's also in his control. And what happens after you die, which is just yet another moment of your life, nothing special about it, like from this perspective. And what happens afterward is again in his control. So you can take it as a threat, of course, depending on your state, that you will be awoken and uh, will be accountable, taken accountable for the things that you've done. This is a kind of threat, and I guess it is a threat for certain people or all of us in certain states. But also it means that, you know, whoever taken care of you all these years, all these times that you live, will continue taking care of you after you die as well. Uh, but regardless how you take it, I guess the most exciting part about such an interpretation is that Quran is more concerned, maybe uh, according to author, about the human psychology. Then the Quran is speaking to this childish people or childish person, which is all of us, who has certain needs, who has certain imaginations about life, who has certain desires. And Quran is regulating them, telling us that, you know, this is how you should act, this is how you should behave, this is what you really want. I know you, my child. This is what you want, and this is how you get it, or this is how you do not get it. It's about, you know, whether we feel in comfort or not, whether we feel in peace or not. It's not about a war of, you know, the conflict between the arguments between, you know, this mathematical proofs or anything. Quran is not a teacher, you know, standing in front of blackboard, sketching some formulas or equations and trying to prove us something through some geometrical relations or through some, you know, the chemical interactions and so on. But rather, Quran is like a psychologist or psychiatrist listening to us, revealing what is hidden inside us, making us face to them, and then listening more, and then giving us guidance, telling us what would give us peace, what would heal our wounds. It's about how we feel, what we desire, what we want, and what makes us angry, what makes us happy. And seeing the reality in us and facing it and knowing that it is real because it's in us. This is the biggest proof of anything. That I need something and the bounty given to me to fulfill this need. That's all I need, to know that there's a creator. My need and their fulfillment, facing with them, facing to them. And knowing that nothing else in the creation can fulfill my need. And knowing that every need that are fulfilled is coming from something unexpected. These expectations or something being unexpected has such a the powerful psychological effect on me. That the bounties are given from unexpected places, which burns a fire in my heart. This is how Quran approaches me, excites me, makes me sad, makes me threatened, makes me angry, makes me challenge, to challenge something. Like all these ayahs talking about the people challenging something reminds me that I am challenging things. Bad things happen in my life, a pandemic occurs, and I challenge it. This is what I am. Like who in our circle, we are how many, 7, 8, 9 people anyway. Is there any one of us who's not challenging what we are been through, what we've been through, sorry, last 1 year, 2 years? Is there one of us, just one of us, who's happy, 100% happy with everything that we experience? Who's not, deeply angry, deeply unhappy? And Quran tells me that, yes, this is you. You are challenging. And now, through the bounties, through reminding the bounties that you receive, that I will teach you how to soothe your anger, your unhappiness. And if you are trying to escape, there's no escape, even after you die. So don't waste your time with your stupid arguments that I will go to non-existence or whatever, because this is not what you want. Even when you say that there is no life after death, you cannot, deep inside, you cannot accept it, and you take the grave as a resting place, a sleeping ground, and it won't happen. It's really interesting. I'm sorry, I'm taking too much of your time, but I'm also trying to help Yusuf to breathe a little bit, since others have other duties. I assume nobody speaks. That the way Quran speaks to us, it's really interesting, really exciting. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah khairan. Thank you. So I just want to give one more example before passing to the next verse or the next paragraph about this author's emphasis of piece versus whole. And actually, I was looking at how did he get this point of uh, the ideology of unbeliever or denier focusing on the piece by taking it out of its context, its life, and investigating it in isolation. So not looking at the whole, but looking at the piece. And here the verse is also saying, وَضَرَبَ لَنَا مَثَلًا وَنَسِيَ خَلْقَهُ. So it's forgetting its own creation. Human is forgetting its own creation, not looking at it, and then bringing up some argument, arguing against us, and then points to a bone and says, who is going to create this? So there are two things happening in here. One is taking the conversation away from here and now, because I should have been the center of this conversation because I am being made right now, but I am pushing it to outside because it's easier to maybe hide something in the outside, because inside humans, especially conscience, is aware of what's going on very well. So I am forgetting this part, forgetting my creation right now, also, not only my initial creation as a baby, but also my current creation, what's going on in here. I am just ignoring that part of the picture and then pointing to an external quote unquote evidence that I come up with. And also, the evidence is an isolated thing. This is also important because as a response to that, Quran is bringing up my creation into the picture, which also reminds of other creations that are connected with my creation. Why is this important? So if we look at, let's say, how we are doing today's science, in order to solve a problem, it is understandable to really isolate it from its surroundings and just focus on what's going on in here. But if we are trying to find an answer to major questions about what is this life about, what is the purpose of this existence, then isolated things doesn't really give us answers. To simplify what I'm trying to say, if I tell you what is this, what does all these pages or these letters or what you see in the screen means, just focusing on single letter isn't going to give you an answer. You cannot simply say, oh, zoom into D over here, or it's a letter shaped like, I don't know, a circle, but not exactly a circle, followed by another smaller circle and then a letter E. So you, by zooming in that much, and not looking at it as a book in which every single letter is connected to the one before and after to make words and then to make sentences, it's become a meaningful message. Zooming in too much is really making me lose the whole meaning. So, and this is what we generally do when the theory of evolution is being used to say that there's no creator, it just happens by itself. What we are doing in there is, in isolation, we are trying to come up with just a case in which a single living entity can somewhat, with whatever probability, be formed by chance. And the understanding is, if I can prove that somehow it is possible, then it can propagate from there on. Again, what we are doing in here is just trying to isolate everything else and just pinpoint it at some point of time, like historically billions of years ago, then we are going to build up our way all the way to here. Quran is saying that what you're doing is really separating the piece from its whole and trying to come up with a explanation for that. And in this example also, the same thing is being done. A dry bone is not a dry bone in the vacuum. A dry bone is once a lively bone. And this lively bone was alive because it was part of this whole picture in which the earth was the cradle from which all the fruits and the plants and the seeds were being created, water was being created, so that in that environment, life was being given to all of them at the same time. And you were part of that picture. Why do you think, or why are you attempting to take a bone as a dry bones, pretty much like taking letter D in this sentence and saying that, well, it doesn't make any sense. It's just like a circular shape. So this approach is a general attitude of denial, or a trick that the denial mindset is using. So just wanted to highlight this part. And it's a good way to use as an excuse to become independent of him, disappear into non-existence and hide there. Because what we are doing in this way is we are denying meaning, purpose. And I consider myself, or want to consider myself, to be aimless and purposeless, so that I can define aim or purpose for myself as I wish, which is going to be very much relied on my whims and desires, personal desires. And then once I cannot live anymore because I'm getting old, there's no escape from that, I just say, okay, and that's, and no consequences, no nothing, because since it was not given, then I can now simply go to sleep with death. So he says, no, there's no, you cannot enter the grave without duties, to sleep in comfort, not to be awoken. The one who is keeping this life and everything in this, on this earth, maintaining them, will not leave you alone, will not let you go, because he doesn't, as you see, he doesn't let anything go. Why should he let you go? Because now in Philadelphia, for instance, it's raining. So he doesn't let the clouds by themselves. He is the one who brings water down. He doesn't let them be. He is the one who keeps putting them into the certain shape that they are. How do you think that you're going to get away with your purposeless attitude? Okay, then I'm going to the second paragraph. Stop me if you have any comments. And then it points out an evidence of the claim with the words, the green tree, شجر الأخضر نارا. It implies, oh, you who deny resurrection, look at the trees. One who raises to life and makes green in spring numberless bone-like trees, which have been dead throughout winter. And in every tree even demonstrates 3 examples of resurrection through the leaves, blossoms, and fruit. The power of such a one cannot be challenged through denial or by considering resurrection improbable. Okay. So 2 arguments he listed in here. The first one is, since the greenness of the trees are being highlighted in here, in contrast to the imagery of the questioner, which was saying that dry bones. So don't you see green trees? How did they happen to be green? They were not green in the winter. So now you see that within a week or two in the springtime, they are being resurrected. They're becoming green. So out of darkness of like a brown branch comes this green life. Where does it come from? Don't you see that? And it's a repetitive action that keeps happening every year. Not only that, a second layer of resurrection is also happening on each three, actually 3 layers of resurrection. The first one is leaves are being created. Actually, it starts with blooming. So first you see the flowers, then you see leaves, then you see fruits. And these were coming out of where? Coming out of nowhere. They are being given life. Even different level and layers of life is being given to those dry branches, the branches which were once dry. What does this show? Because the one that was challenging in the first place was saying that, how come? Who is going to do that? Like implying a lack of power, lack of knowledge, some sort of incapacity. So I don't see anyone who can do that. Uh, Imagine you see some buildings which are bombed. Someone comes and says, "Who's going to rebuild this city?" It is just demolished to ground. Who is going to resurrect this city? I don't see anyone. Like, the government has collapsed, everything is collapsed. Who is going to do that? Likewise, by pointing to a dry bone. But then the one who keeps creating the trees, making them green every year, the power of such a one cannot be challenged through denial or by considering resurrection improbable. Yeah. So one word that attracts my attention in here is considering resurrection improbable. Because the author is saying that this cannot be the basis of your the challenge. Because if you feel like, well, I don't think he has, or there's anyone who is as powerful, as knowledgeable to do such a thing. It's far from my intellect, or it's not really acceptable. It's too much of a long shot. I don't think really, not even movies, not even fairy tales, such a thing could happen. This is what that uh, considering it improbable in the original language. Actually, he is using the word istibad, like coming from barid, far. So seeing it far, seeing it unlikely. And he's saying that what is unlikely here? Because all the evidences are against that. So this part of seeing it unlikely and using it as an excuse for justifying my denial or arguing against is an interesting anecdote in here. Is such seeing it far, is it reasonable? Is it justifiable? Because the author keeps using this throughout his writings a lot. How? To give another example, since I think it's an important point. So let's say the unbeliever mind would say, like, everything being created one God? Come on, like, what? Because human cannot do two jobs at the same time. So we are seeing it very improbable, improbable, very distant, very far-fetched to accept that everything, every single particle, all the galaxies and everything being coordinated, being created, being controlled by one and only. It's very far-fetched. Come on, is being our initial response. But the author, in his like detailed analysis throughout his writings, just flips the table and says, actually, the exact opposite of it is so improbable. Actually, not only improbable, but contradictory. If you think that every single one of the particles or the things, I mean, let alone subparticles or whatever, every single thing, if they control themselves, then we wouldn't observe any order here. And to imagine an order, you are assuming that every particle is giving commands to every other particle, like n minus one particles, whatever huge n number is there, and then receiving that many commands from that many different agents. Such a contradiction. So he is just flipping the table, saying that what you would consider with your initial gut feeling is actually wrong. And one creator creating everything is so much easy to explain this existence than saying that it happens by itself. Likewise, in here, the one who challenges the resurrection says, this dry bone, it's going to be resurrected. How come it's so far, so hard to accept? I mean, it's dead. You see, it's here. Like, the deal is done. It just rot. So he says, you just raise your head and look at how he's doing it the whole time. So why do you think it's far-fetched? Why do you feel like it is hard to accept or improbable? So this challenge, the challenger is being challenged by the naiveness of his initial response or initial challenge by saying that, oh, it's too hard, it's too far away from intellect, it cannot really be accepted. I'll wait 1-2 seconds if anybody has any comments about this part. If not, I'm moving to the next paragraph. Okay. Then it points out another evidence saying, how do you deem it unlikely that one who extracts for you out of dense, heavy, dark matter, like a tree, subtle, light, luminous matter, like fire, should give fire-like life and light-like consciousness to wood-like bones? There's also very beautiful imagery happening in here about the fire itself, because the verse was saying that once that challenge comes, and then in the next verse, very beautifully, this verse was saying that the one who created it in the first place will give life to it. وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ خَلْقٍ عَلِيمٍ is what the author said, as summarizing it very briefly, saying that the one who gave life it in the first place, who created it in the first place, knows everything in the existence, in the creation, because it's part of that big picture. Very beautiful. This is established. And then comes this example, الَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُم مِّنَ الشَّجَرِ الْأَخْضَرِ نَارًا فَإِذَا أَنْتُم مِّنْهُ تُوقِدُونَ. So just look at the fire itself that comes out of this dark wood. So it is so contrasting. I might have said it several times before, but since it's a very fresh memory to me, I would like to repeat it again and to make it visual. Let me just grab you a picture. Just a second. Okay. Okay. So once I was in a tangerine orchard, and in my hometown there are a lot of apricots, but we have never seen tangerine. So for me, it was really an exciting scene, because what I observed in that orchard was everywhere was brown, like earth is brown, branches are brown, leaves are green. But over those branches, there were those orange colored fruits, which I found to be very, I really get excited, because I really felt like, who put them over there? Because this is not something that I would expect them to be. Where even, I mean, forget about the taste and the smell or anything. Where did this color come from? This vibrant color, because there was no example of this color anywhere around. It was very interesting, very exciting to me. And now in this verse, the fire itself is being contrasted with the darkness of wood. So fire, something as luminous and as just a second, Zainab, stop. Okay, so something as luminous and as thin, I would say, as how to put, okay, continue. So something as thin, yeah, let me put it this way, thin as fire is coming out of something as dark and as brute as the wood. So now, which is a good comparison for bones and life. Life is something as thin as fire, which we cannot put inside a glass jar or anything. We cannot really define it. We cannot encapsulate it. It's so so obvious, yet so indescribable. And it's coming out of bones, which we just throw away. We can carry, we can weight, we can do everything with the bones. So the contrast between the two. So the one who creates fire out of wood, why do you think it is improbable for him to create bone life out of these bones or give life to these bones? Which is also, again, making us go through a questioning of causality in terms of fire coming out of wood. Because do you think that it is quote unquote natural for fire to come out of wood? Because to the extent that I realize miraculousness of fire coming out of wood, then I would also realize that since this miracle keeps happening in front of my eyes, then I would say, yeah, there is, I mean, even forget about the life starting from a single cell and propagating. Even right now, this dry bone being given life, yeah, I don't have any problem with that, I would say, because once every single thing in this existence become a miracle for me, every new creation is a miracle for me, including fire coming out of wood, then life being given to dry bones becomes no issue for me. Okay. Yes, Abdurrahman.
Assalamu alaikum. I just wanted to make a quick comment. As you're reading this paragraph, it says, "How do you deem it unlikely that one who extracts for you out of dense, heavy, dark matter, and so on?" It's like deem it unlikely. This made the question more personal for me because, the question of who will revive the bones when they have decayed. Yes, it is a question we might have. Like, how will we be resurrected? Will we be resurrected? These are questions, but I find a more a bigger question I face on a more daily basis is generally, how does this make sense? How will wisdom come out of this event that I'm going through? Or how will mercy actually come out of this event that I'm going through? It doesn't seem likely for me. And I see it's very similar to this thought process that Nursi is pointing at, saying, how do you deem it unlikely that the one who, let's say, creates all the meaning, or has created all the meaning for you so far, and has created, let's say, the world so far, how do you deem it unlikely that he will also be able to bring out mercy or wisdom in this wood-like dead thing that you are now looking at and that you're questioning? So it is a question that I see that I do have, actually. And then reading on in the other verses, like, I see that I am kind of being taught how I should be responding. He says, say he who initiated in the first instance will revive them. So, like, this is telling me where I need to begin. Actually, even before that, on verse 77, it's like, does the human being not consider that we created him from seed? So, like, starting from your basis, I think, like, this is a kind of thought process you need to constantly go through yourself, like from 77 to, like, let's say 83. You need to start from, oh yeah, I was created from a seed, and I need to be careful that I don't take, when I question like this, I might fall into being a fierce adversary. Like, there can't be anything wise in this certain wood-like thing that I'm experiencing, let's say. So I need to first start with saying, that they're first realizing that I have been created from a seed. I have been revived. I have, let's say, this capacity to understand meaning, that I do see meaning in my life, and that going through this thought process, then I can see, like, is not he who created the heavens and earth able to create the like of them? Like, I shouldn't doubt in the creator of the heavens and the earth, uh, because like, when I see a dead wood, because I guess, like, the point I'm trying to make, or what I'm coming to understand, is this is like a very human emotion to not be able to understand something and asking these questions, and there is this thought process we need to go through, and to come to the conclusion, or to remind ourselves that he is the supreme all-knowing creator, and that he has the power to just say be, and it comes to be, and like glory is to him, and to him you'll be returned. So at the end, there's a submission, there's a surrendering that is happening. Yeah, it's just I really enjoyed the thought process that the Quran is teaching us, and how we need to remind ourselves when we face such questions as well.
Alhamdulillah. And it's also beautiful that the example that it gives is relatable to us, in the sense that الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون, so with which you kindle a fire, just saying that you are the one that's kindling that fire, but you see that the fire is being given. So do you know how the fire is being created? You are just kindling the fire, but you are not creating the fire, but it is right in front of you, it is being created. So in response to me trying to show an evidence distant from me, like an outside bone, a dry bone out there, and saying that, look, here is the evidence that nobody can resurrect this, then the creator first gave an example from myself and how I am part of that whole creation, and then pointed to another thing that I would think I am doing, like I am taking to let's say wood and then doing something on the wood to make fire. Then he makes me question, what did you do to create the fire? Who created the fire? Don't you see that the fire is being created right in front of your eyes? Although you know you took part, or at least attempt to make fire, but also you know that you didn't create the fire, because you do not even know what fire is. You cannot define it. You cannot give a shape, or it's so much like you benefit from it. Yes, you know that it's heating you and whatnot, but creating or making fire is so distant to you, which is a first-hand experience for you. You know very well that it is being created. Then as I start to push the conversation away from myself, the creator puts me into the picture and saying that you already very well know it, but you're just trying to deny. You're just trying to cover it up. You're just trying to hide, but there's no way. You're in that. So how come you're trying to avoid? Okay. Then it states another evidence explicitly. It says, one who creates the famous tree, which, while green, produces fire for nomads in place of matches when two of its branches are rubbed together, and combines two opposites, meaning like the green and damp and the dry and hot, and makes the source of the fire everything. So he combines the damp and green and dry and hot, and then combining them creates fire, and then makes the fire source of the fire, makes them the source of the fire. Everything, even the fundamental elements, looks to this command, looks to his command, and acts through his power. Fire being the fundamental element in here, I guess. So everything looks to his command and acts through his power, including fundamental elements such as fire. It cannot be considered unlikely of the one who demonstrates that none of these is independent and acts of its own accord, that he should raise up man from the earth once again, who was made from earth and later returned to the earth. He may not be challenged with rebellion. It's an interesting reading that the author is making in here. He actually very beautifully, he said, now, since fire is considered as one of the basic elements, and showing that fire is being created by him, like he has power over everything, including this basics, your basic building blocks are also his creation. I mean, just in case I forget. And then he says another building block, which is earth, which is source of you. You are made up of earth and the things that are coming out of earth. So why do you think that you are not going to be resurrected? You are not going to be recreated. So very beautifully, by attributing the creation of the fire to the creator, actually creation of basic elements, and the whole creation is being attributed to the creator. This was also a beautiful point. Brother Birkan.
Assalamu alaikum again. So I think all of you realize that Yusuf last a few minutes sounded funny, right? He's talking about the fire being a basic element, and then earth. I guess the next one is water, and then air. This is a funny talk. Like nobody thinks anymore that these are the basic elements, and everything else are created out of their combination. So let's assume Yusuf was careless to say that. But author also says similar things, right? He talks about the fire being a fundamental element, as if, right? But you can also read this sentence as like the green tree and damp, and then and the dry and hot, and makes them the source of the fire. And then he says everything, even the fundamental elements, not referring to fire, but everything, even electrons, or even quarks, even whatever, leptons, looks to his comment. You can also read the text as this, but there are some other places as well. The author says similar things, talking about the air or water or fire as something fundamental. If you are invested in explaining things or talking about things from a science perspective, then yes, such talks are funny, inaccurate, however you want to call, and I would agree with you. Yeah, I personally, for instance, I don't think if we want to call something as a basic element, again, from a scientific perspective or realistic perspective even, I wouldn't choose the air or water or fire as basic element. Like I don't know what the author was thinking. Maybe he at his age he was a stubborn follower of ancient Greek philosophy. But I do not. I do not believe that. I do not expect that. So if somebody tells me that the fire is a basic element, I would say that's funny. And but if you're not invested in that, and you don't think that that's the only way to talk about things, then things may change a little bit. So in my life, there are basic things, that there are basic elements that I interact with. The air is very basic to me, very essential. That everything else to me, it's coming out of air, out of water, out of earth. That's how I experience life. Even if you show me that the air or earth or water is made of some other element, I don't care. Right? From this perspective, I don't care. Like they are not my business. It doesn't add anything to my experience. I see water coming from the skies. I see life, and it's water that I experience. It's not it's hydrogen or oxygen. It's all these naming. It doesn't matter too much whether I call it as water or H2O. That's what I experience. The life coming out of uh, skies, from the sky. So from my perspective, the way I experience life, what is basic, what is essential, uh, relate to my expectations, my experiences. So for instance, in today's age, the children would possibly call computers maybe a basic element, or communication, or internet. What is basic, what is essential, I guess, it depends on your perspective. And we shouldn't insist on, the reading things or try understanding things from a scientific or philosophical perspective. And every time I hear someone is talking about the basic elements, I don't think it necessarily relates to an alternative physical theory. It might be about how I experience my life. Because the humanity, the audience of Quran or audience of myself even, are not the people who are, at least the majority, are not the people who are trained in physics or in chemistry or whatever the domain is. And I'm not saying this as to define a hierarchy. Like there are laymen, you should speak to them from one perspective, and there are better educated people who are more valuable, that you should speak to them from a physical perspective, physicist perspective. I'm not saying that. It's like being educated in physics or in chemistry or in philosophy, although it is, presented as presented us as something, a higher being, it's just a, one feature of a person. It's their, the part of their private life, and it's not expected from all of us. The majority of people live happily without them. We shouldn't be fooled by the claims that we all have to be well educated in science, we all have to be well educated in philosophy. At least personally, I don't believe in that anymore. When I talk about, or when someone talks about the basic elements as they perceive the life. That being said, again, going back to the original sentence we started, I don't think author is calling a fire as a basic element there. I think when he says even the fundamental element, is probably talking about the fundamental element as most of us know, but it doesn't matter. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you, Brother Birkan. Okay. So I'm going to read this last part because we come to the end of time so that we can conclude today's discussion, inshallah. Then, through recalling Moses's, peace be upon him, famous tree, it shows that this claim of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is also that of Moses, peace and blessings be upon him, lightly alluding to the consensus of the prophets. It adds one more subtle point to the phrase. So here he's talking about some subtle pointing in verses, and let's remember this chapter was also very much related to prophethood, and even some commentators interpret the very first two letters Yasin as it is addressing the messenger. Some commentators says it is "O human," but in general there's this notion of prophethood being mentioned a lot, and their challenges, and then Prophet's response to them, even in verse number 76, 75. They cannot help them. So again, there was this them challenging, and in verse number 76, فَلَا يَحْزُنْكَ قَوْلُهُمْ, so let their words not sadden you. إِنَّا نَعْلَمُ مَا يُسِرُّونَ وَمَا يُعْلِنُونَ, we know what they conceal and what they reveal. So in here again, the prophet being the first addressee, so those claims of unbelievers saddening the messenger, and also humans, like believers in general. But then the Quran is saying that no, their claims or words should not sadden you. So in general, we keep observing this theme of prophethood being mentioned throughout this chapter. And the author says with this, at the closing remarks of this chapter, by alluding to a fire coming out of a bush or out of a wood, it alludes to the fire that Musa alayhi salam saw, or in his story, there's this, he is seeing a fire from far when he is in the desert with his family, and he says, let me go to this fire and get light from there for you. So in darkness, he is being driven towards some light source, and he finds this bush in fire, and from that fire his creator speaks to him. This is where we are observing for the first time Musa alayhi salam is receiving revelation. So the author says in here, there is this subtle pointer to that verse, and by that also, since it was one of the main themes of that chapter, the prophethood being mentioned, in a sense, now this wood that catches fire is at the hand of Prophet Muhammad والسلام, because now these verses are being given to him, and the author says this resembles the fire that was through which Musa alayhi salam was spoken, and now you are being spoken through another fire, O Muhammad. So what you are holding at your hand is confirming and is similar to what Musa alayhi salam was given with. So in this sense, it's also a beautiful, subtle, yet very beautiful confirmation or supporting argument for the main theme of the chapter about prophethood. This being said, I'm looking for if you have any further comments, questions. If not, we can conclude here. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر